Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Vicki Goodman, and on behalf of the Friends of the Semel Institute for Neuroscience and Human Behavior at UCLA and the Resnick Neuropsychiatric Hospital Board of Advisors, I am thrilled to welcome you to today's special screening and panel discussion of the groundbreaking new show, As We See It, from Amazon Studios. We are honored that Jason Katims, the creator, showrunner, and executive producer of As We See It, will be joining us today for a panel discussion, along with three lead cast members, Ann Pien, Albert Rutecki, and Rick Glassman. We're also privileged to have Dr. Elizabeth Laugeson, Associate Clinical Professor at UCLA, and the founder and director of the Peers Program to moderate today's discussion. More about each of our panelists later. Now, before we get started, here's our run of show for today. We will first all view the pilot episode of As We See It, which runs for 36 minutes. And immediately following, we will welcome our esteemed panel for a discussion that will go for approximately 20 minutes. And following that, we will have 15 minutes for questions from the audience. If you would like to ask a question of any of our panelists, please type it into the Q&A, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and we'll do our best to get to as many as possible during the time allotted. The discussion portion of today's program is being taped and will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel, which you can find on our website, friendsofthesemelinstitute.org. There you will also find a library of videos from past Open Mind programs, a calendar of upcoming events, information about the Friends Scholar Program, and about our Open Mind Film Festival for high school students that will be held on April 28th. For those of you with us for the first time, today's program is part of our free Open Mind community lecture and film series that brings together thought leaders in science and culture for meaningful and relevant discussions about mental health issues. And now let's all enjoy the pilot episode of As We See It. I'll be back on the other side to introduce our panel. Thank you so much. Welcome back, everyone. What a treat it was to watch this delightful, joyful, emotionally honest, and authentic show with this amazing cast. Kudos to everyone involved with this important production. Thank you to Amazon Studios and to everyone who made today's screening possible. And kudos to everyone involved in the production. And now let's meet the creator and cast of As We See It. First, it is an honor to welcome Jason Katims, the creator, showrunner, and executive producer of As We See It. Mr. Katims was also the executive producer, writer, and showrunner of Friday Night Lights, for which he won an Emmy, Peabody Award, and Humanitas Prize. He also developed and served as executive producer and showrunner of the beloved drama Parenthood, which ran for 6 seasons. Welcome, Jason Katims.
Hi, Vicki. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for sharing your wonderful show with us. We're really honored.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And now let's meet the cast. Suzanne Pian, she stars as Violet. Through her journey of understanding what it means to be on the autism spectrum, Suzanne has welcomed a greater acceptance of what makes her unique and the freedom to express it. She's an avid traveler, filmmaker, and was a featured Mars One candidate. Welcome, Suzanne. Suzanne. Well, she'll be with us in just a moment, I'm sure. Albert Rutecki makes his television debut as Harrison. An actor from Pennsylvania, he studied drama at Hofstra University. As an adolescent, he was diagnosed on the autism spectrum and is excited to portray these characters authentically. Welcome, Albert.
Hello, good to be here.
Hi, Albert. Thank you for being here. And Rick Glassman stars as Jack. Rick is a Los Angeles-based stand-up comedian, writer, and actor with many impressive credits, including a leading role in Bill Lawrence's NBC ensemble Undateable. and he hosts a podcast, Take Your Shoes Off.
Hello.
Welcome, Rick.
Thank you.
And Dr. Elizabeth Laugeson, Associate Clinical Professor at UCLA, founder and director of the UCLA Peers Clinic that teaches evidence-based social skills for young people, interim director of the UCLA Tarjan Center, and program director of the UCLA Autism Center of Excellence, Core D, and author of 4 books, including The Science of Making Friends. Welcome, Liz.
Thank you so much, Vicki.
And
All
now
right.
everybody's there.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for those nice introductions, Vicki. You know, as we just saw from the pilot of As We See It, you know, this is the story of Jack, Harrison, and Violet. They're 3 20-something roommates, you know, on the autism spectrum who are just navigating the complicated world of adulthood, like many 20-somethings. They're striving to get and keep jobs and make friends and, you know, even fall in love. The show premiered on Amazon Prime last month, and it's been an instant hit. I know I binge watched it over the weekend and absolutely loved it. Couldn't get enough of it. The characters are supremely charming and really lovable. And the storylines are really interesting and entertaining. And as someone who works with autistic adults and their families, I would also add that the stories feel very familiar and real. So I was thrilled when Vicki and Wendy asked me to moderate this Q&A, because I work very closely with adults like the characters and their families in the show. And so just very quickly, by way of background, you know, I developed this program at UCLA Peers back in 2004. And as Vicki mentioned, it's one of the few evidence-based programs that assist adults and young people on the spectrum in making and keeping friends, in finding and maintaining employment, and also developing romantic relationships. And these are all areas that are addressed in the series As We See It. So in case our audience isn't aware, you know, one of the unique and inspiring aspects of the show is that many of the actors, like the characters, are neurodiverse. And so we have autistic actors playing autistic characters, which really has historically not been the case in TV and film. And not only that, but you have neurodiverse people not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera as part of the crew and the production team. So there's a saying in the neurodiversity community, nothing about us without us. And that's a big part of how we conduct research at UCLA and involving the autistic community. So my first question is for Jason Katims. As the director of As We See It, you know, why was it important to you to involve neurodiverse people in creating the characters and the stories that portray them?
Well, I would say the first, I would say that, you know, the title of the show is As We See It. And what that means to me is that we're telling the show through the lens of these neurodiverse characters, which is different than, you know, what you sort of expect when you see movies or shows, when you see like a show that has a character who's on the spectrum, who's somebody's son or somebody's brother or sister. This is the opposite. This is our show is coming in through the eyes of these characters, and the supporting characters are the brother of one of them and the father of one of them and their aide, but it's through their eyes. And so, you know, in order to tell that story, and to tell that story well, you know, I felt that the way to do it was to cast authentically. I felt like that the potential for the performances that we would get by casting authentically would be, you know, it would be so honest and real, and the actors would be able to call upon their own stuff from their own histories. Now, these actors are all playing characters that are not themselves. They're not autobiographical. They're different than who they are. But I believe, and they could talk about this, that they all draw on parts of themselves and parts of their history, things that are true to them, to create these roles. And if you watch this episode that we just watched, and if you continue and watch, you know, the rest of the episodes, I think you'll see these really amazingly specific, nuanced performances that is what makes this show so special and so honest. And, I felt a real sense of responsibility. And if I was going to take the story on, to try to make it as authentic and true as possible. And that was definitely the first and most important step, in telling the story that way, was to find these incredible actors that we're with right now.
Yeah. We're going to hear from the cast in just a moment, but the performances were really, really exceptional. And before we hear from the cast, I also want to point out, Jason, As We See It is not your first foray into writing neurodiverse characters, right? You've also portrayed autistic characters in your other work, like in Parenthood. So if it's not too personal, I think, many of your viewers would like to know what your connection is to the autistic community and what motivates you to write these sort of complex and interesting characters.
Well, I have a son who's on the spectrum. He's now in his early 20s, like the characters on the show. When I wrote Parenthood and introduced the character of Max, the character of Max was about the age of my son at the time. And so this story is really personal to me. I had a professor in college who said, the adage that they say about writing is write what you know. And this professor said, well, don't, he sort of, amended that from write what you know to write what you're learning about. And so that's the way I wanted to sort of approach this. When I started thinking about, this show, which was now years ago, it took a lot of time for us to get here, to get to this point, to make these 8 episodes. And when I first started writing the show, my son was just getting to be the age of these characters. And I was just getting into, his, beginning early years of adulthood. And I started to be thinking about, as I'm sure he was thinking about, what his future looked like and what it meant to, what adulthood would be like, working in relationships and independence and all of these things that we, are talking about in the show. And I realized, there aren't a lot of shows about that. There isn't a lot of, there's less that we see about, when we look at autism, I feel like there's a lot more we see about children, less about adults. And I was very interested, in exploring that territory. It was, as I said, something I was learning about myself and curious about and wanted to know more about. And so I came to it, not with like, not approaching it as like, I'm gonna tell you what it is, but more I'm learning about this as I do this.
Yeah, I love that idea of write what you want to learn. I mean, that's really interesting. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But I also want to hear from the cast members as well. And first, I've got a question for Suzanne Pian, who plays Violet on the show. Now, Suzanne, you've had such an interesting life. You have worked with Academy and Emmy-award winners like Jason Katims. You presented for a Nobel laureate and a U.S. Secretary of State on climate change solutions. As we heard from Vicki, you were even a Mars One candidate. I also read that you've traveled all over the globe. You visited every continent except Antarctica, which I'm sure is soon to come. And I just discovered recently that you mentioned that you're a graduate of UCLA. So go Bruins. So obviously on the surface, your life appears very different from your character Violet. And, there's a saying that if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And of course, what that means is that there's so much diversity across the spectrum. And as Jason mentioned, you're not playing yourselves, these are characters, but is there anything about Violet that you resonate with, anything that you kind of relate to about experiences?
Yeah, Liz, thank you. Well, definitely. It's like what Jason said, like there's, there's so many moments that Violet, when Violet has these very authentic emotional reactions to life happening, that definitely is a shared experience in my own life that, I've had to draw on in a lot of ways. And it was funny because some of my friends who watched the show, they were like, oh gosh, they like they're reminded of, like what it was like, because the learning process of how to grow up, it's very similar to Violet, right? There was all these things that I had to learn in a very hard way. So it took a lot longer, and I couldn't understand, like, for instance, that relationship with Van. Van's very protective as a family member. And I encountered that a lot with my own, family members or friendships, because people could see that something, the way I approached and saw the world lacked a certain filter. I would just, and then, but two, also, I couldn't see certain dangers. Probably like even the way that I travel, I was like, oh yeah, we can do that. That's fine. Right. And then someone's like, are you going to do that? Or, you're like, end up with like no money in the middle of like, the jungles or something. And then you're like, oh, that was very difficult. So there's a lot of these things that I share with Violet being very headstrong and wanting to make her own choices, and then not knowing that she's walking into something that's going to be very difficult at the end of the day. And so with Jason's writing, it was just incredible because it was so intuitive. It was like I knew exactly what was going on with Violet inside and out, just from the experiences I've had in my own life. So
yeah. It's interesting. As I was reading your bio, I was thinking, this woman is fearless. She's adventurous, and honestly, the character of Violet feels at times sort of fearless too, like ready to kind of take on the world. And I kind of wonder now if you maybe brought some of that to the character and from your own personality, or if it was on page.
Oh yeah. I mean, even the fact that Violet was, she wants to have a boyfriend, she wants to do what normal people do, right? And so it didn't really matter like what her brother wanted her or not wanted her to do. I could really relate to that because at there was a certain point, I remember there was just this, my mom was like, my kid has no fear. Like, it's kind of strange, right? Like I didn't have like the same types of hindrances around whether it's approaching a person and to talk to them about something, like from a very young age. She was like, I would just go up and like talk to people. There was like no stranger danger. So the world does, it was kind of adventurous because I'd be curious about something and then I want to know about it. And then I would just want to keep figuring out a way to do it until I could, right? Like it was hard to impede me with the same types of fears that I think the normal world or society has, right? Even something as simple as like, to me, it's like, oh, I want to go to Mars, right? Like it's so obvious, like why, like, and how it can be easily done right now. The normal society would say that is impossible, right? So it's just a difference in how I view my perspective. I don't have the same boxed thinking around what is possible or not possible.
Yeah.
Do you think you'll go to Antarctica before Mars?
Yeah, I was invited to Antarctica actually by one of the other candidates. She was like, "Come do this off-world thing." She's so cool. She's from South Africa. She like created this entire. I'm sorry. I'm going to talk about space. Like, do not let me go down this route right now because. But her name is Adriana Marai, and she's like one of the L'Oreal UNESCO winners. She's a quantum biologist, and she literally created like this entire South African space department. And she's one of the candidates, and she was like, come to Antarctica, dude, because she's actually creating these different bases around the world right now to test analog communities to bring people off the planet.
That was your dog saying, Suzanne, we only have so much time.
All right. Well, thank you. Well, we can't wait to see pictures from Antarctica and Mars possibly. So, for the next screening, we'll look forward to that. We just heard from Rick Glassman, and actually my next question is for Rick, who plays the character of Jack. Now, in addition to your role on As We See It, Jack, you're also a stand-up comedian, a writer, a director, and you host a popular podcast called Take Your Shoes Off. So, those credits sound very different from the character of Jack. And so, Rick, I'm kind of wondering, a couple of things. I'm kind of wondering what inspires you about your character. There's so much emphasis on challenges and having to overcome things in autism, but I actually see a lot of strengths, especially in these characters. And so I want to give you an opportunity to honor those strengths that you see in Jack and share what you like sort of best about him, but also as a writer, if it's not too bold to ask this question in front of Jason Katims, what do you hope happens for Jack if there's sort of a season 2, on the horizon?
Okay, so there's 9 questions in there.
What do you like about your character, and what do you want to see happen?
Yeah, so I guess I'm kind of cheating your question, but what inspires me about Jack, I could answer more easily. What inspires me about playing Jack and having the opportunity to do this, I personally, I'm very inspired by things that, where I'm a human, that feel good, right? And you chase that, but things that like make me look good, make me a better person, make me shine, but also that in situations where I feel I am of value, where I'm wanted, included, so I don't have to worry about how does this person feel about me. I understand that we all are here and it's collaborative and valuable, and it's intimidating being, a lot of things, but acting, it's intimidating. You're coming onto a set, I'm a leading role on a show with somebody who I was a fan of before I even auditioned for this, telling a story that is bigger than me and that involves so many people, and just to be on this set and do this thing felt so good, and I was so inspired. And being on a Universal studio lot, I don't know if this is a corny, superficial answer, but you drive onto a lot, and like I would call my parents so many times, like the subtext being like, look what we did, like look where this is. And so that's the inspiring part of it. What I like about Jack, thank goodness, and thank you, Jason, because it's a newer thing for me in my real life as well, is Jack's told what he's supposed to be doing, whether it's the literal eye contact and the rules, and if it's a lifestyle of things that should be prioritized that aren't currently. And I know, I hear it, I get it, but he does his own thing. And as the show goes on, through circumstance and situation, he's kind of forced to, and he grows, and he becomes more aware of himself, and more importantly, I think, aware of other people, and they feel things that he's not feeling. And I love to see a character that on surface, or I should even say, in the pilot you see, and he's a lot, he's tough. But then he grows, and another corny statement is, so a lot of people in my real life know me as a comedian, and they've only seen me at the comedy clubs where I'm on and being goofy and being silly, and they think that this is all I am. And I never knew that really until somewhat recently. And so there's this idea that you could be this thing, but that's not all you are. This show does very well with all of these characters. And for season 2, where I hope we go, Jason actually just told me that he's going to let me direct a couple of the episodes. He said it. You can quote me on that. Quote me, it's okay. He said it. Jason, it's my turn. You can quote me on that.
Yeah.
No, I want to. I'm big into the crypto world in real life. Collecting comic books and Magic the Gathering cards, and I would love to have Jack's character be involved in the NFT world, and find a way to. I don't know if it's, he's gonna be rich, but find a little side hobby in the crypto space.
Well, maybe that's a good pitch for Jason for a season 2. We'll have to see, to be determined.
No obligations. Season 3, season 4, if we're there, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
All right, thank you, Rick. My next question is for Albert Rutecki, who plays Harrison on the show. Now, Albert studied drama at Hofstra University, and is actually making his television debut on As We See It. Albert, it's pretty impressive to make your television debut on a hit show on Amazon Prime. I can't even imagine what your life must feel like right now. So I'm kind of wondering how portraying Harrison on this series has changed your life. Do people recognize you? Do they take pictures with you? They want your autograph? Like, how has this show changed your life?
I'm able to pay off my student loans, for one.
That's good.
I haven't been recognized much. People who already know me are excited about the show. A lot of them have seen it now. The only person that they like recognized me was I was at a trivia night and someone yelled Harrison. Though they could have been like a friend of an acquaintance or something.
No, I think that was you.
No, the person could have been a friend of one of my acquaintances or something, like just for further net of the people who know me, you're excited about it thing.
Well, maybe
Yeah.
I could also, oh, sorry, go ahead here, Albert.
Yeah, it's also odd some of the reactions in some of the questions people asked. Like I have a couple neighbors who, after they saw the show or talking to me about it, they said that their first reaction was, wait, does Albert really not like dogs? Because Harrison does not like dogs at all. But they didn't even have to ask me because they like realized how silly that was to even think at first, because we're friends because of our dogs. It's dogs hang out. So it's just odd to see how quickly people start associating you with the character as well. It's just a lot of different moving pieces here, and other people reaching out to you. Like my old grade school music teacher sent me a nice letter, or I hadn't seen her in probably 15 years. So that was very sweet.
That's very sweet. Well, the fact that people are mistaking you for your character and the traits of your character, I think, is just a mark of a good performance. So so we look forward to seeing more and watching Harrison's story unfold as well. We're rooting for you. So just to kind of round things out, I wanted to circle back to Jason about something that you said earlier, Jason. You know, there's the old adage, right, that writers should write what they know, but, you know, you had mentioned that you had a professor in college that told you to write what you're learning. And so I'm curious to know what you've learned from the series and also what you're hoping viewers will learn and take away from the show.
Well, I think, what have I learned? You know, I've learned that, you know, my instinct was to do something on this show that at the first, when we first thought about it, seemed like scary and daring, you know, to cast Authentically, because you have to remember this was cast a few years ago, so it's world has changed a lot even since we cast it, and that idea was not what the first go-to thing, and I didn't know how that would go. I didn't know what the actors, if we would find the actors. I didn't know what the talent pool was like in the neurodiverse community, all of that stuff. And so I've learned that was it gave the show a kind of honesty and complexity that I couldn't have even imagined, you know. And it's always my goal as a showrunner, because I've been showrunning for a long time, and over years it's become my goal that, like, you know, it used to be like when you first start doing it, it's like you want the episode to be exactly what it's like when you've written the script. You want that script to be exactly realized. That's your goal. And over time, I realized that my goal has become, when I'm sitting in the editing room, my goal is that the show is better than anything I could have imagined when I wrote the script. And you know, so I feel like, you know, this was something that I learned while doing the show, that the performances that you know that these actors gave they were drawing on things that, you know, were so real and honest and true in ways that sometimes I imagine, I don't know if they even realize, you know, at times. And,
I knew.
Well, Rick does, but but that's, I think, kind of, you know, sort of what I learned, what I hope for other people to see in the show is that, I feel like the show is sort of, what I love about the show is like to quote what you said before, if you met one person with autism, you met one person with autism. What I'm very proud of about the show is that we're portraying more than 3 characters, but especially these three characters who are neurodiverse. And they're also vastly different from each other, and they all bring such beauty. They all have their own challenges, and they're all different from each other. And I hope that it's sort of like people who see it, who maybe don't know as much about this world, will have a little bit of a deeper understanding of it, will demystify it, will see how much beauty that these characters have, how much dignity they have, and that it starts to sort of change the narrative of some of the assumptions we might have of people with autism.
Yeah. I was also struck by the fact that so many of the challenges are so typical of 20-something-year-olds. I mean, there's so much, similarity. So I thought that was beautifully done as well. And I hope that was reflected, for others. I hope others noticed that as well. I know we've got to sort of wrap our time up here, but we have lots of questions from the audience, and Vicki Goodman is going to be moderating a Q&A with our audience. As we're kind of transitioning there, one last question for Jason. Will there be a season 2? We were talking about it like there was, but can you make it official? Is it happening?
I don't know. We're hoping to hear soon. Our fingers are crossed. I know that, everybody at Amazon has been such great champions of the show. I know that they're very proud of the show, and but we don't yet know. We don't yet have an answer, but hopefully we'll know soon. Hopefully it won't take another 3 years to do 8 more episodes. So we will see, but we're hoping to hear soon.
All right. Well, we're looking forward to getting some good news and seeing what happens with these very interesting characters. Thank you so much for allowing this time. Vicki, let's go ahead and open it up to our Q&A from our audience.
We have a lot of questions, but just before I start to give you the questions, I just want to thank you all. This was such an inspiring discussion, and it was so wonderful to get to meet you after having seen the show. And thank you for sharing. And Jason, thank you for making the show. We've learned a lot from it. And I think, I hope that the public really tunes in and embraces it, and because they have a lot to learn from these wonderful characters. So thank you for writing them and sharing them with us. First question from Chelsea. She says, I loved your show. And especially how you portrayed the struggles that parents, and I'll add the brother as well, siblings go through. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I think our hearts all stopped when Joe Montana shared with Rick that he had cancer, and Violet's brother. So I wonder if you could share a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, it was very important for me to tell the entire picture. As I said before, I have a son on the spectrum, so I'm very much, Joe Montana's point of view in the show is one that is very close to me and close to my heart, and I feel like it's really important to tell the story, to tell it from everybody's perspective, to make everybody a 3-dimensional character, not to make any, I feel like that makes the whole story much richer. The story of, Violet's brother Van, of him, trying to have a life and also feel like he's, responsible for, Violet, who he loves, but it feels like he's, it's a lot for him. He's struggling a lot to figure out how to make all that work. And also, I want to mention also, Mandy, the role played so beautifully by Sosie Bacon, who is the therapeutic aide. That was an incredibly important story for me to tell too, because I feel like, having from personal experience, my son over the years, I feel like there's been so many incredible people who have been supporting him and supporting us, our family, over that time. And I just developed so much incredible respect for that population. And I really wanted that. I really wanted to also imbue that, character with some of those traits that I've seen in so many of these people that I met over the years.
Thank you, Jason. Question from Sam. What do you hope anyone who watches the show will take away from it? Particularly, he's asking people who are on the spectrum, but I would say the public in general, the education that that we're all getting watching.
What I hope people take away from watching this is, one of the things that made me want to tell this story was, I heard a statistic, I don't know if it's exactly right, but that 80% of college educated people on the spectrum are unemployed. And I remember hearing that a few years ago, and I was like, that's, just unacceptable. And I was wondering why that was. And part of the reason to tell this story is to show these characters truthfully, to show them with all of their skills, their brilliance, their beauty, their warts, their challenges, and put it out there to try to dispel some of the myths that people might have and might not even know that they have about this population. If there are people who are neurodiverse themselves, whether it's on the spectrum or in other ways, and watch this show and feel seen, that would be like the greatest honor for me to be part of telling this story, honestly. I mean, that is my greatest wish. Now that the show's been out a little bit, I've started to hear from some people that they have, that they have embraced the show, that it is meaningful and important to them, that they haven't seen a show like this that, portrays them in this way. And, that is certainly something that we all, I think all of us, aspire to in telling the story.
Thank you. Again, thank you for teaching and for allowing us all to learn. There's a question here for Rick. How has it been for you on your journey of understanding yourself due to your late diagnosis? And this question is from Cheryl, and she says she has an adult autistic daughter who was recently diagnosed and wondered if you had any tips.
Well, shout out to Cheryl. We'll put her Instagram handle up here. The journey, I was diagnosed when I was around 5 years ago, and it was it just completely opened up my blinders, not to know things, but just to be more aware of how much awareness I lacked. And I continue to grow and I continue to learn these things, but more so it's like I've only been in social situations for 5 years now. It almost feels like I didn't have the tools. It was a lot easier before, I'll be honest, before I realized, well, maybe if you pretend that you're going to be able to direct in season 2, Jason might feel uncomfortable, but you take the swing and you make your jokes anyway. But I think for my journey, and also I'm actually going to do a legitimate plug. This thing did so much for me. It's a book called Asperger's from the Inside Out. It was a father who was diagnosed after his son was, because it is genetic, and the person who diagnosed his son said, by the way, and it's just, there's so many tools and just like making sure that you're around people who are accepting. I mean, we all have to take care of ourselves and keep our side of the street clean and be kind and be empathetic and be patient. But like, I could be the same exact person I am now in different social groups and feel unworthy and feel much more annoying and feel less included than just being around people who are accepting. So I don't know if I'm supposed to give advice, but if so, it's just literally take note, like literally write down, who do you feel good when you're around, and then seek out those kinds of people, seek out those specific people.
I think that's good advice for all of us.
Yes.
Thank you.
I was thinking.
Absolutely. we are almost out of time. We're actually a little bit over, but I think this is a very interesting question for Jason. Between Friday Night Lights, Parenthood, and As We See It, what universal ideas would you consider come through all three shows?
Well, wow. I think, it's weird because all the shows that I do, they're about different worlds, but when I approach them, I approach every show almost, like exactly the same, which is I want to try to get I want to get inside these characters. I want to tell the stories from the inside out, not look at these characters from outside and move them around like chess pieces, but get inside their hearts and tell it from that perspective. And that's what I sort of really tried as hard as I could to do. And as I said, not just do it with the main characters, but everybody around them, and to make sure like that we're really addressing everybody, who everybody is in an honest way. And so to me, the commonality is in that kind of like, hopefully that kind of humanity that kind of comes through in those stories.
Thank you. And it definitely does. You've given us three of the most beloved shows on television. And that's why, because the humanity does come through and people relate and enjoy watching the show. And it makes you think, and your shows make people think, feel good, and learn. And that's what else could we ask for? I want to thank everybody, Jason, Liz, Albert, Sue Ann, Rick, everybody at Amazon Studios who were so kind to us, giving us this incredible pilot episode to air. So thank you to everyone. Praying for season 2. And putting in a good word that we'd love to have a discussion and a reprise of this if we get season 2.
You would love that.
So thank you very much. Thank you to our open mind audience. We look forward to seeing you back. Our next program is on March 3rd. It is with Dr. Anna Lemke, who wrote the book, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. So I hope to see everyone back. And thank you very, very much for this wonderful presentation.
Thank you. Thanks for
Bye.
having me.
Thanks, Vicki.
Thank you.